Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1650A, and today's date is August 28th, 2018, and the title of the episode is, This Has Been Planned Years Ago to Rid the Country of Our Controllers. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, what we are seeing here is two sides to the same exact story. On one side, we have the mainstream media. They are out there telling us how the economy is slowing. The real estate market, we might go into a housing crisis maybe in 2020 or a recession in 2020. And they're saying that tariffs are going to be bad for this country. Now, yes, the economy is not doing well. Yes, we see the numbers out there like GDP and all that stuff. It's manipulated to make us believe that the economy is doing well. This is being done on purpose. This has been planned a long time ago because those who are in control right now realized that eventually we were going to have to get rid of the central bank. And the only way to do this was at the point in time where their system completely breaks down. And once it does break down, they will have the ability to transition us into a new system. And you can then start calling the controllers out, which is the central bank, and say, let's take a look at what you've been doing over the many, many years to see why our system continually crashes. And this is what is happening right now. Now, the plan is to make it look like the economy is doing fantastically. Meanwhile, the entire operation is to prepare the United States for what comes after. And what comes after is an economy without the central banking system. That is the plan, and this plan has been in place for a very long time. And when we look at the economy right now, it is completely breaking down. And this is done on purpose. Remember, there are two narratives to the story. There's the central banking narrative, and then there's the patriot narrative. And the patriot narrative has to be in control when the system comes down. They need to blame the central bank and those who were in control for the many, many years. This way, they can order an audit. This way, they can look into the dealings of the Federal Reserve. And they can start opening it up and looking at it and presenting it to the public and showing them this is why we need to get rid of the central bank, and convincing the states to pass a law that says we don't need the central bank anymore. And we see already that we are headed down this path. Now, the economy is breaking down, and the mainstream media, they're going to use this to try to shift it and blame it on the tariffs, on the trade war, on the new deals that Trump is doing. Now, remember, these bilateral trade agreements are being done on purpose. It's getting rid of the globalist system and setting us up so we can bring manufacturing back to the United States. Now, they realized that they can't bring it all back at this point in time right now. It's completely impossible. But they can lay the foundation of how they're going to bring it back for later on. And that's what they're doing right now. And when we start to look at many of the different economic sectors, we can see that everything is really starting to break down right now. And we see that the U.S. housing market, it is headed for the broadest slowdown in years. Housing prices have been pumped up so high, they are too high, and people just can't afford them right now. Now, of course, rising prices, they're supposed to be fantastic for the everyday person, because when the prices of homes rise, people feel great. The economy's doing well. Well, if the economy's not manipulated and everything is organic, yes, this would work out. But when you blow up a bubble and you create the housing market where the housing prices are so high and the wages are continually dropping and people can't find jobs, that is a whole nother story. According to a new report from the National Association of Realtors, prices for starter homes are the highest they have been since 2008. Now, just prior to the collapse of the housing market in 2008, Ben Bernanke was out there and he said there is no housing bubble and that we've never had a decline in house prices on a nationwide basis, and therefore we'll never have one. And then what happened? the opposite of what he was telling us. That's what's going to happen once again. Remember, the central banking system, they are never going to tell us what's really going on. And whenever they're telling us that everything is great, the economy's strong, it is always the opposite. Now, when we look at the housing prices, what do we see? Well, first-time buyers needed 23% of their income in order to afford a typical entry-level home. This was up from 21% in the year prior, and the highest in the past decade. This, of course, should surprise nobody, as price gains in the housing market have long outpaced wages. In fact, in most markets, the average home price increase is double the growth in hourly earnings. So how in the world is someone going to afford a home? It's completely impossible. And then if we look at, San Francisco, New York, we can see that a household needs 65% of its income to buy a house there. If we look at Los Angeles and Miami, you need between 59 and 55%. And when we really look at these markets, the only people that can afford these types of homes is the 0.01%. And of course, what has happened over time? The wealth has been funneled to the 0.01%. And this is what we see when a central banking system comes to its end cycle. And this is what we're seeing right now. Shiller is out there. Remember, they look at 20 different cities. In those cities, the bubbles have been inflated like there's no tomorrow. But what we're seeing at this point is that home prices, they have dropped by 6.31% year on year. This is the weakest since December of 2017. And we know that new and existing homes, they are flat over the last 6 months. And when we start to look at all of this, we can see that the housing market is going into a time period where there's going to be a lot of trouble. We see that the student loan official has quit, blaming Trump, warns that the system is rigged. Now, the top federal official overseeing $1.5 trillion student loan market bubble resigned, citing in a letter that he says is the Trump administration's blatant disregard toward protecting the nation's 44 million Americans struggling with student loan debt, which they had no problem taking out, which they made it easy for people to take out. And remember, college tuition continually moves up, and there's no way that people can afford it. So what do? You have to take out debt. This, again, is a central banking system. It is designed to put everyone into debt. Credit card debt, auto debt, student loan debt, you name it, mortgage debt, you name it, you are in debt one way or another. This is how a central banking system is run. They don't want you wealthy, prosperous. Yes, there's going to be a certain few that will become wealthy, that will make it in this environment. But think about it. The mass of people who are not, that's what the system is designed to do, to keep the masses at a lower level, to continually have them work and work and work and never get out of that debt. And for each generation, it gets worse and worse and worse. I hear a lot of people say, who are working in their 20s or 30s in the 70s, going into the 80s, saying, listen, I'm retiring. I really don't have that much debt. I have a pension. Yes, you have to remember how this system is designed. In the beginning phase, there's not that much debt. In the beginning phase, if you start out there, most likely you will be fine. But as each generation comes into the system, it gets worse and worse and worse. Here we are at the end cycle of this system, and most of the people can't even get by. They have a very difficult time trying to buy a house, get a car, without taking out a loan. Yes, if you go back to the 70s, back then, when the dollar was worth a lot more, you were able to pay cash for things. You were able to pay cash for a car. You were able to go out and use cash to buy clothing and other goods. Today, most people have to purchase everything on credit because the value of the dollar has decreased, which means you need a lot more of them to pay for the same exact products. And here we are. And we're starting to see individuals in different departments within government resign. Why? Because there's major corruption and they're getting out before everything starts to fall apart. Now remember, the entire system was built and designed to be a globalist system. And yesterday we talked about NAFTA, how Trump now has this new trade agreement with Mexico. He doesn't call it NAFTA anymore. It's the U.S.-Mexico deal. And there are many different points here, and I just want to go over some of these once again. When we look at the NAFTA loophole, remember, it was about hourly wages. Is it exactly where we want it to be? Not as of yet, but it's a lot better than it was. I mean, he tried to get rid of it altogether, but realized that Congress would have to get involved in this, and it would have taken way too much time. So the NAFTA loophole closure is explained with emphasis on the auto sector. The key is a 75% part origination level for auto assembly and a 40 to 45% level for parts with a minimum wage of $16 an hour. The source origination rate, 75%, is even higher than all previously forecast negotiations results. Example of downstream consequences benefits. German automaker BMW recently built a $2 billion assembly plant in Mexico. It's almost complete. Most of their core parts were coming from the EU, steel, aluminum casting components, or Asia. That's where the electronics came from. Now the assembly plant will have to source 75% of the auto parts from the US and Mexico, with 45% of those parts from facilities paying $16 an hour. Result? BMW will need to modify their supply chain and build auto parts in the US and Mexico. Agriculture is another important sector. Overall, it appears Mexico has agreed to a common set of food manufacturing safety standards. And we also see there was the removal of all subsidies in agricultural trade between the U.S. and Mexico. So here are the 7 key points of this new trade deal. New rules of origin, requirements to incentivize billions a year in vehicle and automobile parts production in the United States, supporting high-wage jobs. The strongest fully enforceable labor standards of any trade agreement. New commitments to reduce trade-distorting policies for agricultural goods. Improvements enabling food and agriculture to trade more fairly. Strong and effective intellectual property protections. The strongest disciplines on digital trade of any international agreement. The most robust transparency obligations of any United States trade agreement. And that's the key right here. The most robust transparency obligations of the United States trade agreement. Transparency. And we see this is just the beginning stages of all this. And we need to realize that U.S. and Mexico have agreed to no protectionist tariffs, subsidies in the agricultural sector. Now, Canada protects its dairy sector with massive protectionist tariffs and subsidies. What are they going to do when they negotiate? We will find out. But we can see at this point what Trump, the Patriots, what they're doing right now is they're breaking down all of the globalist plans, one step at a time. Yes, it would be great to do everything and get rid of everything all at once, but it's completely impossible. Remember, the deep state, they're still out there. The central bank, they are still out there. They're still fighting against all of this. They don't want this to happen. Remember, this is their system. This is not something the people wanted. This is a central banking system. We are stuck in it. We have been stuck in it since 1913. And now it is time to get out of it. This has been planned for the end cycle of the central banking system. Remember, their plan was to have an event or a war or something like that to cover up all of this because they knew their system would not last longer. And think about it. A war would cover up everything. Everyone has to sacrifice. We're not getting supplies into the supermarkets. There's a credit freeze. You can't get fuel. You can't get anything. Why? Because there's something else going on, something major. But this time they don't have that. This is the problem. And they don't know what to do. And the good guys, the patriots, they have the upper hand. They planned for this. And now the plan is in motion. And you're going to hear Trump continually call out the Fed. And at this point, I do believe Powell might be working hand in hand with Trump and the patriots to bring down this entire system. So we can see the plan is in motion. This has been planned for a very long time, and we are going to go through this transition. And everything that we're seeing right now is being prepared for this new economy that's going to come on board. And the rest of the world is going to have to join one way or another. And many of the other countries, they are starting to follow in the footstep of what is happening here in the United States. And eventually, and this is why there are leaders out there calling this out, especially the central banks, saying this is not a good thing, because they realize once all of these nations start to look at what's been happening and start to realize, yeah, maybe we need to move in that direction, guess what's going to happen to the central bank? Guess what's going to happen to the system? It's going to implode, and it's going to be a complete and utter disaster. And this is why everything's being prepped for when that time comes. So be prepared. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.